Forbes India Small Business Summit, presented by PhonePe Payment Gateway.
Let me quickly open this with a broad question, and Shivakumar, let me start with you. What does it mean for an MSME to think big, and how can small companies adopt this mindset?
To start with, because I'm from representing startup TN, and how startups and MSMEs are related, I will just put it and then I will come from here.
Sure.
For us, it is like all startups are MSMEs, but all MSMEs are not startups. This is
Okay.
how we do and then start. And if you see, for every 100 MSMEs in India, almost 95 are micro, 4 are small, and at least 1 is medium. If you take the developed countries, 50 are micro, 40 are small, and then 10 will be the medium. If you see what happens is if the economy advances, micros are disappearing, which means there is a need for us to think big. Otherwise, we are going to disappear. And how it is means the choice of entry into the business is one of the reasons why they are not thinking big. If you take in a 2x2 quadrant, formal, informal, necessity, and you say opportunity, whichever in the right quadrant, the informal and the necessity one, they have low human capital, low financial capital, and then low productivity, which means they are not thinking big. They are trying to sustain and survive in this one. But they have other, where it is like we are able to do it. So how startups are there, if you see, the aspiration for startups is becoming a unicorn status.
Yes.
That it is like, if you see for MSME, there is already a criteria. If you go for 100 crores, it's an medium.
Yeah.
We can give a name called Tanicon, and then that can be an aspiration for them. And that from there, it is like they can start thinking big.
Yeah.
So what we want is, instead of one unicorn, there are thousands of Tanicons, which will spread across the state, and that will show a seat for democratization of entrepreneurship. Instead of having a concentration of businesses in one place, if it is across the state, that will be good for us. So we can't instill a mindset, which like we have to grow the community, and then community itself grow those mindsets.
Mr. Raghunathan, on similar lines, what I asked Shivakumar, how can startup founders think big from the get-go? What does big mean? And how important is it really to have this mindset?
First and foremost, in a present-day context, the profits are made from the operations and from the valuations. Most of the startups today are focused on valuation gains, not on operational profits. They make big presentations, they make tall claims, they make the investor get convinced, then the funds start flowing in, then they expand, and then they start thinking what to do, how to spend the money has become the thinking of the startup entrepreneurs. I have come across this with many. Second is, the biggest challenge for them is most of the startup entrepreneurs are embarked on a mission which is new, either a concept or a product or a service. They enter into a virgin markets. They develop an idea, convert it into a profitable venture. 70 to 80% of them struggle in the running and die away with the passion. 20 to 30% exist with ups and downs. 3 to 4% of the startups reach the real top. So the aiming big is always there with any entrepreneur. I want to be like Bhavesh is the goal of every entrepreneur. Big does not mean profit. Big does not mean fame. Big is accomplishment. Yes, inner satisfaction of what I have contributed and as a pioneer in a service what I provide. That way, India is so diversified. If we have created close to almost 140 unicorns in a couple of years, it's not a joke. It means a lot of sweat. But how many more we can create is what we need to evaluate.
Absolutely. We've got unicorns, we've got decacons. I like the word tanicons. Daniel, let me come to you now. Tell us, how can MSMEs shift from a survival mode to a growth-oriented mindset? And, the need to take risks, the need to think big, how do they do that? And like Mr. Raghunathan said, not just in terms of profitability or just in terms of valuations, how do they need to think big? And most importantly, move on from a survival mode to a growth mindset mode?
Yeah, I'll give you a good example. So in IT&T, we used to conduct roundtables often with the MSMEs, startups. One thing we find is, we can call it as a buzzword, Industry 4.0. So most of the MSMEs want to adapt technology in the production line or in the process, whatever it may be. Technology transformation is already happening, but in MSMEs, they're taking it as a very, very serious thing. So another thing is, MSMEs is taking more support from the government agencies, where they can get funding or they can collaborate in different projects, and mostly they're searching for survival mode to the transition mode, the growth mode. And most of the MSMEs are into the research, that is where they could find niche market. So when they target a niche market, surely they'll go into a survival mode to a growth mode. Yeah.
All right. Do you agree with that, Mr. Raghunathan, what Daniel just said? And most importantly, what is needed to empower startups to have a growth-oriented mindset? What factors can contribute to thinking big?
Startup or an MSME, both of them need to nurture removal from the day-to-day clutches. Micro entrepreneurs especially face a couple of problems. One is profitability, day-to-day operative profitability. Second is they can't afford to hire professionals in their organization. Third is all the headaches and pains are on their shoulders. When they do well, they will find surrounded by many. When they are not doing well, they will be surrounded by people who want to take away the money from them, which is banking or the lenders or anybody for that matter. So the mindset of a startup or a micro entrepreneur is lot different. It's more of a painful exercise, but they claim that painfulness because of the passion of reaching the goal, the vision. You take, for example, whether it is a manpower. All the top class people coming out of the educational institutions are hired by the top class corporates. So what is left over is what is available for the micro enterprises to hire. Unemployability is the biggest challenge today in India, not the unemployment. With them, they have to run the show. Today, they have to be also tech savvy. The last 3-4 years have seen drastic change in technology advancements.
Yes.
Today we talk about AI. Today we talk about robotics. Today we talk about EV technologies. Today we talk about drone. Today we talk about defense corridors. So much of changes, these people are not able to cope up. On the other side, so much of changes in terms of digital empowerment. You take GST for that matter. You take income tax for that matter. You take compliances for that matter. Everything is online. But these people are scared. They need somebody else's assistance, like her. Their professional services are required.
So you're saying the constraint is the skill gap that is there. First, we need to address that, and then perhaps startup founders and companies can look at.
I think the startup owners as well as the micro entrepreneurs need a space for themselves to hone their passion.
Sure. Okay, Divya, let me come to you now. We all talk about how startups need to continuously innovate for their survival and, of course, to stay ahead of the game. But tell us, how can MSMEs balance the need for innovation with the limitation of resources? because every startup has its own limitation in terms of funding or in terms of what, what kind of sales they are doing. So how do you integrate the best of both worlds?
That's a very good question. So MSME is the foundation of the economy. They're the strongest drivers of economic development. But the world in which we live today, the only constant is change. So naturally, as a sector, the entire MSME sector has to innovate. But they have a bottleneck of shortage of resources, specifically funds. And I think the best way to bridge that gap is to leverage through your government funding schemes. There are more than 60 plus government schemes. If you take the Mudra loan scheme, there's up to 10 lakh of limit, there's no collateral. It is given to non-corporates, it's given to micro. And in the budget 2024, this has been doubled to 20 lakhs. So there are several schemes that are there which MSMEs can make use of, and the government is also pushing it very actively. You have SIDBI, which is providing you financial and other support and promotion. You have an MSME innovation fund. So if you're in a startup in the innovation space, that is definitely something you should explore. Now, over and above this, I think very often, most of the MSMEs do not have a large capital outlay. So we assume that, when you look at innovation, it's automatically technology. But I wish to differ to say it is not just technology that you innovate, but the business model is very important. Today, the largest taxi service provider does not own a single taxi.
Yes.
Your largest accommodation provider, Airbnb, does not own a single building in its name.
Absolutely.
Right? So similarly, having a strong business model is very, very important, and it builds the gap. The third aspect is how you save cost. Now, we have a very popular concept of time sharing for CFOs. And I think that's a very good model, especially for MSMEs, because you cannot afford the talent. So any money that is saved is money earned. I think definitely go for that. The last aspect is when it comes to capital outlay, go for your PE investor. The reason I say that is hold 51% of the holdings so you have control on the board. But over and above that, instead of going for loans where you have to service an interest, instead go in for PE funding. In the budget also, they've now abolished angel tax, which means that more investors are going to come forward to invest in small, micro, medium enterprises. So that's a great avenue. The last way in which you can, bridge this aspect of limitation of resources is approach IITs, approach colleges where they have an innovation hub. So if you want to do research, they will have the state-of-art facilities. You don't have to build your own and do it ground up. Make use of these aspects. Go for a more sharing concept so you save money in the process.
Divya, thank you for that. You've very beautifully broken down the various aspects that startup founders can look at, and hope many of them have noted them down. But, Keshav, let me come to you. Mr. Raghunathan mentioned how technologies have evolved in the recent years, and if it has completely changed the game. It is the buzzword, be it artificial intelligence, ML, generative AI. Survival of a startup today literally depends on their tech edge. Tell us how MSMEs can utilize technology to scale their businesses, differentiate, reach new markets, the kind of conversations you have with the many founders you interact with.
I think, firstly, I should make it clear that compared to many of the panelists, especially from the previous session, I come from a very old school nuts and bolts kind of company. We're not an IT company where we make, B and C class automotive components and things like that. So perhaps my experiences are a bit different.
But we would love to have the different
experiences. I think in Tamil Nadu,
yes.
perhaps there might be a few more people like me than the other side. IT and the AI and things, excuse me if I've just made some notes on my phone. I think for a company like mine, I don't consider myself as a startup. Where an MSME, I think what Sir said is very pertinent. Startup, slightly different. MSME, slightly different. What Mr. Raghunathan also said. It depends on your vision. Profitability, your scalability, okay, we don't need to get too much into that. But I think rather than giving a general point, I can give a specific point related to my company and few of people who are similar size to me. For example, we have people working with us who are perhaps not educated in English as a primary medium. And a company like mine, we do a little bit of exports. So for a long time, my people who are very qualified and very good at their jobs, they struggle to communicate with the export customers. These are all practical, small problems which are actually faced. It's not some big, sexy problem which we can discuss, but these are the day-to-day issues. So a thing like ChatGPT has really given them so much more self-confidence and been such a boon to them that they are able to communicate with all of their, customers. And they have the confidence that, what they're saying is correct. And they also have, it also gives me more time. Because, sometimes if by mistake they make some error, there's nothing for me to rectify. Right? So it's enabled, it's a big, kind of opening up a new avenue for a lot of people. Similarly, today I was on a Zoom call and, they had done an AI companion which also has regional languages. Okay, it doesn't work very well yet, but Tamil, to some extent, it was not bad. Hindi, maybe my Hindi was very bad, so it did not, analyze it properly. But I'm just saying there are a lot of small things that MSMEs need to, because we can only look at small things.
Yeah.
People have already spoken about limitations of finance, limitations of working capital, but I think small steps to success is how we use IoT, AI. There's a lot of things which can save time and money for MSMEs. Learn to use it cleverly.
Absolutely. Coming to you now, Daniel, Keshav gave an example of ChatGPT and how it's helped, his team resolve some of the issues that they had. What are the most accessible technologies that can help MSMEs enhance their productivity and efficiency according to you? And again, if you could give us some examples from your own businesses.
Yes, yeah, sure. Most likely CRM tools, different customized tools can help MSMEs. Then digital banking service, which would help in banking, all the banking stuff for the MSMEs. And I also want to tell you that in Tamil Nadu government, so they have developed 3 different Center of Excellence for MSMEs to access. So let's say they want to create or develop a new product development. So they want to design a product. So they can use these CEOs where they can do the initial R&D work, and they can also develop a new product, out of it. And so one of the CEO, Tanco, actually. Yeah, so Tanco has a metal printing 3D printer, so which can use in new product development, where in traditional way, MSMEs use moldings and other stuff, so it will cost higher. Yeah. So if, let's say, the MSMEs use these facilities, so they'll get it affordably, right? So, yeah, so these are the available resources, resources, available technologies there in Tamil Nadu, where these MSMEs can get the resources easily and accessibility.
Productivity and efficiency. Divya, coming to you, how can small businesses ensure that the digital transformation journeys that we are all talking about is in alignment with their long-term goals, because that's important. The kind of technologies has to match of actually what you want to achieve.
So I think the last few years, we've had a lot of challenges, especially for MSMEs during the time of COVID. And at that point of time, e-commerce was a very important tool that everybody had to get back on, because we're living in a very unique era where every PIN code can be reached. The logistics has been so simplified, where as a business owner, as long as you have an idea and a product together, logistics is taken care of by somebody else. But what you do need to be mindful of is the cost that is involved with it. Adi got it said, sales is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash flow is reality. So a lot of MSMEs, they want to increase their turnover to have a market share, but without profit, that is pointless.
Yeah.
You have a profit, but your entire profit is blocked up in inventory, trade receivable, working capital, then you don't have cash. So that becomes very difficult. So while digitization is important, I think it has to be a mindful step to understand whether you have the cash flow to be able to meet that demand of digitization. And to take you through some portals which come at a very low cost, which the government has given. There's a GEM portal where the government e-marketplace, you can take through government tenders. There's no middleman there in that process. Then you have ONDC, which is also discussed in depth, which is an open market and plays a level playing field for your MSMEs. Yeah. So there are several portals that come at very low cost, which I think MSMEs should and small businesses should make use of.
All right, Shivakumar, let me come to you. While we've spoken about digital technologies changing the MSME landscape, again, Divya spoke about how to align those technologies with a company's long-term goals. But tell me, what are the common barriers that companies face, especially small companies face, when adopting new technologies, and how can they overcome those?
I think with launch of every new app, either the barrier is reduced or a barrier is created. So this is one. And if you say, if you last decade, the barriers are different, and then currently the barriers will be different, and then future it will be different. But if you take in general, there are three things which I can say at currently we can do. One is financial constraint. Second is the legacy status and integration issues. And third is there is lack of clear ROI is not there. So if you take financial constraints, when the last panel, the TVS partner panelist spoke,
Praveen, yeah.
Mr. Praveen told only 14% of the MSMEs are getting access to the capital. And now it is like the cost of acquiring, maintaining and implementing a new technology is prohibitive for small business. It's not only the initial investment, and it is also in the maintaining and updating it. The second one is legacy status. If you see, it is like if you say it's an adoption, what is, there is already set systems, set process, and set resources, which means already you don't have lack of expertise to manage and upgrade your systems. And there will be resistance of change. So that is one issue. And then if you see, there are more technologies are coming up. For example, there is no clear ROI for them. If you take blockchain, I'm using it for traceability. And what happens is, I don't know how traceability will enable my business further, but there is no use cases sometime like this. And how using this will improve my things. So this makes, what happens is, there are too many options are there, and this leads to decision paralysis. This is the main barrier I feel it's one thing there. What we can do is that proverb says, instead of giving them a fish, you teach them how to capture the fish. Now, what we can do is, Sarah has mentioned about ChatGPT. That is the real brainstorming tool which we can come up. In 2032 or 2034, ChatGPT would have consumed all the data which is produced in the world right from the stone encryption. So it can be a right tool which help the MSMEs to brainstorm and select the options and overcome whatever the barriers it has been there. So a government cannot support in each, or a government or a community or an ecosystem can't support an individual and an institution in each stages.
Yes.
They have to brainstorm, and for brainstorming, generative AI tools will be the future, and then that is the one way we can overcome all the barriers together.
You agree with what Sivakumar said, Mr. Raghunathan, and again, you mentioned this earlier also, that skilling the team is sort of the biggest barrier that companies have today, and how do we overcome those?
In my opinion, when I have been a manufacturer for almost 40 years in my life, we used to have products which takes about 1.5 years to develop, and the product was in market for at least 15 years. Today, the obsolescence is becoming very fast. We have had a conventional banking, which is term loan and working capital. It's time for India to immediately open an account called R&D account. And an R&D account without an interest, it's a money which needs to be spent by small enterprises in parallelly developing alternative technologies, investments, and people. Our total expenditure on R&D in the country as a whole is not even 1%. So we need to pump in more money in R&D. R&D in small enterprises and in startup enterprises. Incubating a kid within the womb is different. Incubating the kid after it is born is different. We have not cared much for the kid when it was within the body. I think it is time for us to network. People like Shivakumar should network innovation center, innovation hubs, along with the micro entrepreneurs and startup enterprises, and come out with a definitive plan of innovation, parallel line of product obsolete killing. That's what is, in my opinion, needed.
All right. So while we've discussed how we can overcome the barriers that companies face while adopting to new technologies, Divya, tell me, how can MSMEs leverage digital platforms to expand their market presence, not just in India, but globally?
As I said before, I think India is in a very unique era right now where, e-commerce is very strong and deep-rooted. So while I do believe, yes, there's a lot of opportunity to go global, I think locally this is the time for MSMEs to really make use of untapped potentials and expand. So there are ways in which, for example, you have quick delivery service where everything goes within a flash of a minute, but this is not there in the most developed countries across the world. So locally, I think there's a lot of scope for expansion for MSMEs. Like I said, there are various digital platforms, tools that are available at no cost for them to make use of. And even when you go at a global stage, you have Amazon, Flipkart, everything where you can, sell internationally also with the right regulations in place.
All right. Keshav, let me come to you, and I want to talk to you about the funding landscape. We've seen a funding winter. Things have started to look better now. How should MSMEs think about financing options really to support their growth ambitions? What would your advice be? We had Divya who threw some light on the various options that are available. What would your advice be?
Again, I think when we talk about funding winter, I don't know if I'm the right person. Perhaps the panelists from the previous session might have had a better explanation for that. So yeah. I've not done a startup. Yeah. So, I can't really comment on that. The only thing we started is with a joint venture with an existing with an existing customer. So I'll try to talk more about MSME difficulties of financing. Yeah. Right. I think Divya has already mentioned it. Right. The first source is the government. Right. Whether it's the Mudra schemes, right. Whether it's the public sector banks, which are SEED-B. The government in the previous budget, they have said about a credit guarantee scheme or a fund about 100 crores. They have mentioned different projects like that, right? Those are the kind of things which we have to do. The alternative ideas, which maybe has not been explored as much by traditional MSMEs, things like Kickstarters, crowdfunding. But crowdfunding perhaps, that could be an option, but many MSMEs, in a sense, they are crowdfunded. They are crowdfunded by their family, by their cousins, by their friends, people like that. So perhaps in a way, it's a kind of a traditional kind of crowdfunding. Yeah. And the last one, which is, recently has come out, is the government has allowed MSMEs to come onto the stock market, right? I think they call it the NSE Emerge or the BSE SME, if I'm not wrong. For companies which are maybe more on the medium side of it, which are more mature, perhaps that could be a source of funding. If you get on the stock market, then move on to the primary stock market after that.
Okay, so that brings me to my next question, Shivakumar. How can small companies really position themselves to attract investment and fuel their expansion plans? And most importantly, what should they be mindful of? And, after him, Divya, if we could have your thoughts as well.
I think what we can do is think about investment ecosystem 5 years ahead now. So that will be what we can nurture. And 5 years from now, the small business ecosystem will be there. So I feel it is like gig economy will kick in very lot, where and then 9 to 5 jobs will be out of fashion, and the no code will become chat to co-create things will come. And now in MSMEs you can't take equity. Maybe in future we will have an policy or an ecosystem where you can take equity in MSME. That what sir crowdsourcing has been saying. So there is a saying in Bangalore, if you throw a throne, it will hit a founder. So maybe 5 to 10 years down the line, if you throw a stone in Tamil Nadu, it will hit an MSME investors.
That's very beautifully put.
So that will be there. And if you see how what we can do is how the small business can prepare themselves is, one is technology adoption, and the two is adoption of the market trends. If you see 5 or 10 years down the line, we will not be using mobile phones. There won't be mobile phones for us. And Industry 5.0 would be kicked in, and mass personalization would have been come. So I just, my specs will be my new phones. I just have to scan his shoes, and I have to scan my size, and my customized product will be delivered to me from there.
Some of these products are already in the market.
Yeah, and then I can go for an, I can go to a tea shop and ask, I want a strong tea and light tea. I can also ask Pepsi, I want a strong Pepsi, and then do it. And my medicines and foods will be customized to my DNA. These are the trends which will be coming up. At the same time, the technologies will also be in that line. If our MSMEs or small business able to align to adopt these particular technologies, and it will be there, it will be easier for them to create funds. And what happens is, when investors are looking at when a startup or an MSME or small business look at an investors, they don't really need funds anymore. They need funds, but they want to bring them additional customer segments, additional revenue streams, or any additional things. It is like not just funds. They want to bring in something that will be helpful for the small businesses.
Divya, your thoughts? Would you like to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I think I go by 4 golden rules for MSMEs or small businesses. The first one is avoid debt trap. I think a lot of them get over leveraged and they spend a lot of time servicing that debt, pay high interest, and they never break even eventually. The second is before you invest in a long-term asset, think twice. Because the yield that you get out of long-term assets which are more than a year is very less. So look at options like leasing, hiring, financing, which could possibly, help for a short-term basis till you're able to establish a business. The third is do not take short-term funds for long-term assets. For example, if I'm taking a working capital loan for 12 months, don't buy a building or a machinery with it. Use it only for short-term purpose. The last is never borrow against shares. Don't take a loan against shares because you're effectively mortgaging your ownership in the company by putting the shares there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Those are the 4 golden rules. So one final question, Mr. Raghunathan, that I would like to ask you is, tell us how can MSMEs build a strong, recognizable brand that kind of stands out in a crowded marketplace, basically made in India for the world?
That is a big challenge. How do you build a brand? There are 2 ways of building it. One is spend money on advertisement and build a brand. The second is spend money on quality and build a brand. Kurlon was a brand which was built from scratch. NEPC was a brand which was built by advertisements. Who exists, who sees the life beyond, needs to be seen. Most of the entrepreneurs must take a view today. The world is so small today. No more that I do business within my locals. Today, I can do business globally. How different is my product? How good is my product? It's not the cheap that sells. It is the quality and the service that sells. This must be very, very clear in the minds of the people. The game is not a sprint. The game is a long-term running.
All right. One final question which is open to all of you, your final closing comments on what should companies really be mindful of? What is that one important thing that companies should think of in order to think big and grow? Shivakumar.
I think everybody was speaking about valuation and other stuff. Raising fund from customer is the real fundraising.
All right, raising funds from customers. Divya.
I think I would, ape that thought, like raising enough funding, having a strong position is very important for MSMEs. Yes.
All right, Daniel.
So I go with innovation.
Innovation.
Yes.
Innovation is key for us.
Yeah, innovation in a big thing. So not to go with a small thing, better to go with a bigger version.
Okay.
So start with the small and end with a big vision.
All right, big vision.
Apart from the points everyone has covered, I would say for MSMEs, cash flow, cash flow, cash flow.
All right. So
make sure the positive cash flow always, always.
Mr. Raghunathan, final comments.
Few years from now, there will be no one-man show companies. People need to align with like-minded people. I mean it. It cannot be a one-man show.
All right. With that, it's time for us to wrap up this conversation. Thank you so much, panelists, for your insights and for your comments.
Forbes India Small Business Summit, presented by PhonePe Payment Gateway.